January 12, 1991. U.S. Air Force Nighthawk stealth fighter bombers take off as operations begin to achieve air supremacy over Saddam Hussein's Iraq. August 13, 1940. Royal Air Force fighters intercept Luftwaffe aircraft in the crucial battle for air superiority over southern Britain. Control of the air has become a critical factor in modern warfare. With it, your forces have an almost free hand. Without it, it's almost impossible to win a war. The battle plan is control of the air. June 22nd, 1940. Hitler now effectively controls most of Western Europe. Only Britain and her empire still hold out. Their cause looks hopeless, and Hitler is sure the British government will soon sue for peace. But Britain's new leader, Winston Churchill, states, "We will never surrender." Hitler and his battle planners realize they must find a way of persuading Britain to negotiate. The ultimate threat is invasion, but the narrow seas of the English Channel stand in the way. To create the conditions in which an invasion can take place, the German battle planners look to the skies. August 2nd, 1990. The tiny oil-rich state of Kuwait is invaded by her neighbor, Saddam Hussein's Iraq. The United Nations immediately condemns the attack and demands Iraqi withdrawal. It's obvious that Saddam will not leave Kuwait, so President George H.W. Bush of the United States takes the lead in building a UN-approved coalition to liberate the country. But Iraq's armed forces are the fourth largest in the world. From Kuwait, they're in position to sweep into sparsely populated Saudi Arabia and gain control of more than 50% of the world's known oil reserves. Commander of the UN coalition forces, U.S. General Norman Schwarzkopf and his battle planners must find a way to protect Saudi Arabia and then force the Iraqis out of Kuwait. In both cases, World War II and the Gulf War, the battle plan is control of the air. Without it, neither the Germans in 1940 nor the UN coalition in 1990 can begin to achieve their ultimate goals. Once aircraft had shown their potential during World War I to attack ground forces, control of this new battlefield in the sky became a vital first step to any progress on the ground. The potential of strategic bombers, such as these German Gothas, to cause massive damage to enemy cities and civilian morale made some military theorists suggest in the 1920s and 30s that air power could be the ultimate military force. It would win wars on its own without the need for armies or navies. But during the rest of the 20th century, it became clear that these claims were exaggerated.
Air control as a battle plan, it should always be remembered, is always the prelude to something else, often something much bigger. We need to remember that air control is required to dominate the skies above a battlefield. Once that battlefield is secured, then all sorts of other things can happen.
Control of the air is the essential prerequisite for carrying out almost any type of modern military operation. Whether one needs air superiority over a particular part of the battlefield for a specific operation, or air supremacy to dominate an enemy completely, the reality is that you cannot achieve either without control of the air. Air control is so crucial for any modern military operation that the battle plan to achieve it must satisfy extremely demanding requirements. Clarity of objective. Battle planners must determine whether they need air superiority just to carry out a specific operation, or total air supremacy. The means by which the objective can be achieved is the next critical factor. In air combat, technology is immensely important. Has a commander got the right equipment to achieve his objective, or must he tailor his battle plan to fit what he has available? Force ratio. As air warfare has grown steadily more technological, it isn't just aircraft numbers which count. The quality of the air crews which support them, the accuracy and power of the weapons which they carry, and the radar and command and control systems which direct them can make a smaller force immensely more powerful than a larger one. Intelligence. Battle planners must know what they are up against, which targets must be disrupted or destroyed to achieve their objective. They must also be able to monitor how well their military aims are being met. Follow through. Commanders must be single-minded about executing the battle plan and avoid being distracted into moving on too quickly and allowing the enemy time to recover.
The great mistake often made by air forces is the dispersal of their efforts. They fail to pursue air control with the necessary single-mindedness. They allow themselves to be diverted by tempting targets of all sorts. But until air control is won, attacking such targets is nothing less than a waste of resources.
But paradoxically, while pursuing their objectives single-mindedly, commanders must also retain flexibility. New weapons or tactics introduced by the enemy may completely rewrite the script which the battle planners thought they were following. In 1940, the Germans are strangely slow to set clear objectives for what will be the Battle of Britain, even though the invasions of Poland and France have shown how vital air control now is. On May 21st, a month before France surrenders, the German Navy submits a memo to Hitler on the requirements for an invasion of Britain. Top of the list is the need to control the air over the English Channel and southern England. Hitler does not respond. He's basking in his victories and believes that Britain will have no choice but to negotiate for peace. All that seems necessary is to keep the pressure on Britain. At the end of June, Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring, head of the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, issues a very broad objective: to grind down the whole Royal Air Force, not just Fighter Command, which defends British airspace. Göring identifies RAF bases, support units, and British aircraft factories as targets. A seaborne invasion is not mentioned. Luftwaffe operations begin in July with attacks on British shipping in the Channel. These do have the effect of drawing out the RAF, but they are not followed up. Few attacks are made on RAF bases. It's not until August 1st, after Britain rejects a specific peace offer, that Hitler orders his commanders to create the necessary conditions for the final conquest of England. The Luftwaffe will overpower the English Air Force with all the forces at its command in the shortest possible time. Göring now plans a short, sharp campaign to destroy Fighter Command. Mass bombing raids will lure British fighters into the air, where they can be destroyed in combat. The raids will focus on RAF bases to put these out of action and destroy more RAF aircraft on the ground. Göring sets August 10th as Adlertag, Eagle Day, the date for the new assault. Now, his battle plan will be put to the test. Half a century later, in 1991, Coalition Forces Commander Norman Schwarzkopf faces a similar challenge. With his air commander, General Charles Horner, he must devise a strategy that will achieve control of the air and then isolate Iraqi forces in Kuwait before a land campaign is launched. The battle plan which Horner and his planners develop is sequential. First, the Iraqi air defense system and air force will be destroyed. Then, communications and supply routes to the Iraq forces in and near Kuwait will be cut to isolate them. And then, their ground forces will be damaged as much as possible before the coalition launches an assault. There will be strikes at the leadership, but the emphasis is on attacking hard targets. There is no assumption that an air campaign on its own could persuade the Iraqis to pull out of Kuwait. Britain, July 1940. Hermann Goering's opponent, Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, head of RAF Fighter Command, knows that to invade Britain successfully, the Germans must gain control of the air. His objective, therefore, is simple: to stay in business and prevent the Luftwaffe from achieving its objective. He refuses to become heavily involved in combating the German attacks on Channel shipping. Dowding is sure that these probing attacks do not represent the real German threat. For him, it's a waiting game to see what the ultimate German battle plan to control the air will be. Iraq, December 1990. Saddam Hussein's battle planners are in very much the same strategic position as the British in the Battle of Britain. They know an attack is coming. Their objective must be to prevent the UN coalition from gaining air control and being able to attack the formidable Iraqi forces in Kuwait at will. Saddam is confident that if a stalemate can be achieved, the coalition against him will eventually collapse. To achieve their objective, the Iraqi battle planners believe they have a strong hand in the second major concern of air control: the means to achieve this objective. Like the British in 1940, the Iraqis have a sophisticated air defense system supplied by the Soviet Union and France. As the Israelis had found in 1973 during the Yom Kippur War, an integrated defense system like this could be a formidable barrier. But tactics and weapons had moved on since then. General Horner's battle planners are confident that they have the means to beat the much larger Iraqi air defense system. The first essential of their battle plan is to destroy the early warning radars and vital regional control centers in the south of Iraq. This will force the SAM, surface-to-air missile sites, to rely solely on their own tracking radars. Unmanned decoys will then provoke the SAM sites into turning on their radars, so they can be attacked with barrages of radar-seeking missiles. After this, the SAM sites can be eliminated methodically with precision-guided weapons and cluster bombs. Any Iraqi interceptors which try to take off will be detected from over 250 miles away by AWACS, airborne warning and control aircraft, with their long-range radars. The AWACS will direct coalition fighters in to destroy the Iraqis with long-range air-to-air missiles before they even get close. Over the previous decade, the sophistication of decoys and radar-seeking missiles had increased enormously. To make the initial breakthrough, Horner will use two remarkable new weapons: the Tomahawk cruise missile and the Lockheed F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter bomber. Launched from ships or submarines, the Tomahawk can fly a preset course for more than 800 miles below radar level to hit a target with pinpoint accuracy, while the subsonic F-117 is effectively invisible to radar. This remarkable aircraft is the latest creation of the famous Lockheed Skunk Works, home of the U-2 and Blackbird spy planes. It carries two 2,000-pound Paveway laser-guided bombs. Developed during the Vietnam War, Paveway had proved a great success, attacking heavily defended pinpoint targets. It was now guided by an improved system named Lantern. Once control of the air has been achieved, conventional bombers, such as the 1950s vintage B-52s, with their 70,000-pound bomb load, will cut off and destroy the Iraqi forces in Kuwait. In development is J-STARS. This airborne radar and control system is designed to monitor movement on the ground and instantly guide coalition aircraft into the attack. Only 2 J-STARS are flying, but they are available for deployment. The Iraqi battle planners may have thought that their large and sophisticated air defense system provided the means to halt any coalition air offensive. But they had no real understanding of what was heading their way. In 1940, once they focus on destroying RAF Fighter Command, Goering and his planners tailor their battle plan to the means they have available to carry it out.
The Germans in 1940 are realistic about what their air force can achieve, because they realize that their aircraft can only achieve certain things. It cannot, for example, launch an attritional struggle against the British economic infrastructure.
Their bomber force is made up of twin-engine medium bombers with relatively light 4,000-pound bomb loads. But these had proved perfectly capable in Poland and France of destroying enemy airfields and other military targets. Typical of these bombers were the Heinkel HE-111 and the Junkers Ju-88. These bombers are backed up by the Junkers Ju-87 Stuka dive bomber, which has proved formidably accurate. Goering's main fighter, the Messerschmitt Bf-109, is one of the best in the world, a match for the RAF Spitfire, and better than the RAF's most numerous fighter, the Hurricane. Goering is also confident that he outnumbers the RAF in modern fighters, even though the Luftwaffe has lost almost 20% of its Bf-109s in the invasion of France just 2 months earlier. In the air, this battle had actually been a much more even contest than the stunning German victory suggested. Meanwhile, Goering's opponent in Britain, Air Chief Marshal Dowding, has been planning ahead. During the German Blitzkrieg in France, Dowding had refused to send any of his powerful new Spitfires to France. For the RAF, things are not as bad as they seem. The two sides have roughly equal numbers of fighters. Although Dowding's Spitfires are substantially fewer than the Bf-109s, the Hurricanes are potent bomber killers, and more than a match for the twin-engine Me-110, which was the Luftwaffe's bomber escort. And Dowding has one inestimable advantage in the means at his disposal: radar. In 1936, he was told about a new system for locating aircraft using radio waves, which was being developed by Robert Watson Watt at a secret research establishment at Bawdsey on the east coast of England. Dowding saw its potential immediately and played a crucial part in building a screen of radar stations around England's east and south coast. These could spot and track hostile aircraft up to 100 miles away. The towers were noted by the Germans, but they completely failed to recognize their importance. Dowding's genius is to build radar into an integrated air defense system. Chain Home, as the new radar system is codenamed, can pick up the German bomber squadrons as they form up over their bases in France. Information about an impending attack is passed back to sector controllers and then to RAF Fighter Command headquarters. Here, the development of the German assault is monitored on a map board. The controller can then decide which are the most important sectors and scramble his squadrons as necessary. Just in time, Britain has acquired the means to focus its precious resources precisely where they are needed. During July, the German Channel raids give Dowding and his men the time to test the system and refine their tactics. It is a vital dress rehearsal. Radar in 1940 and stealth and precision technology in 1990 were to be vital factors in the third requirement for the air control battle plan. Force ratio. The other elements which go into deciding the true balance between opposing air forces. The Unified Air Defense System based on radar enables Air Chief Marshal Dowding to husband his fighters on the ground until the enemy is relatively near. He does not need to dissipate his strength in keeping up patrols of aircraft and can bring his full force to bear against the Germans. Also, the RAF is fighting over home territory. Fighters can get back to base quickly to rearm and refuel and return to combat far more quickly than the Germans. It is a crucial example of what the military call a force multiplier, effectively increasing the number of aircraft Dowding has available. In contrast, the Luftwaffe is fighting far from its bases. The Bf-109 has endurance for only 20 minutes combat over southern England and about 5 over London.
In making its plans for the Battle of Britain, the Luftwaffe makes the mistake of counting planes on the ground, the absolute number of aircraft in its inventory, rather than its ability to keep planes in the air.
Equally important is the fact that most German pilots who survive being shot down end up as prisoners of war, while the RAF flyers are often back in combat the same day. In control of the air, it is often the availability of sufficient trained pilots which is more important than the supply of new aircraft. Just as the balance between the two air forces in fighter numbers is closer than often claimed, so too is the number of trained pilots. In force ratio terms, the RAF is actually ahead. In the Gulf in 1990, Saddam Hussein does have one air weapon which could have an effect out of all proportion to its true military value. The Soviet-designed Scud surface-to-surface missile with its mobile launcher. This has a range of 175 miles, far enough to reach Israel. The warhead could be chemical, biological, or nuclear. Even if only high explosives were used, an attack on Israeli cities might provoke counterstrikes. And these could shatter the fragile UN coalition, which includes several Arab countries. Against this threat, the US has developed an anti-missile system, Patriot, which is nearing the end of its trials. And in other areas in 1990, it is new technology which is the massive force multiplier for the coalition battle planners. The relatively limited number of stealth fighter bombers with laser-guided missiles can bomb far more accurately and have an impact out of all proportion to their numbers. A single Tomahawk cruise missile, with its eerie accuracy over 800 miles, can do the job of squadrons of bombers dropping ordinary so-called dumb bombs. The range of the AWACS radars enables coalition fighters and bombers to intercept the Iraqis as they take off and destroy them from great distances. The Iraqis not only lack any of this sophisticated equipment, but they are apparently unaware of how important it will be. Like German ignorance of the significance of radar in 1940, this reflects a major breakdown in the fourth fundamental for air control. Intelligence. The need for battle planners to know exactly what they are up against, what their targets should be, and how successful they are being in hitting them. In 1940, the Luftwaffe's intelligence does not realize that the towers along the coast of England are the key to an elaborate centralized air defense system. Goering is advised that the RAF squadrons cannot leave their sectors, and thus interception by large groups of fighters is unlikely. Luftwaffe intelligence also wildly underestimates the number of fighters the British have available, the speed at which they can be replaced, and their quality. It believes that the Bf-109 is far superior to the Spitfire, and that even the cumbersome Me-110 is better than the Hurricane. Thus, it's with extraordinary overconfidence that the Luftwaffe battle planners finalized their plans for Adlertag. The British, on the other hand, have no illusions about the task facing them, and initially overestimate the number of aircraft arrayed against them. Both RAF and Luftwaffe intelligence consistently overestimate the rate at which the enemy is being shot down. For the British, this does not matter so much. They already estimate that the Luftwaffe has far more machines than it does, and are not surprised that it keeps coming. But for the Luftwaffe pilots, it's a nasty shock when the RAF keeps fighting back, well after it should have run out of aircraft. In 1990, Iraqi intelligence seems to have done nothing to prepare Saddam Hussein and his high command for the storm which is about to break over them, and the fact that they are facing a completely new type of air war. In contrast, in 1990, coalition intelligence, if anything, overestimates the strength and resilience of the Iraqi Air Force and air defense system. Horner and his battle planners are given accurate information about the fixed targets they need to hit to achieve air supremacy. With this level of precision, they can construct one of the most elaborate and devastating air control battle plans yet seen. Iraq, January 1991, and Northwest France, August 1940. The attackers are now poised to execute their battle plans for control of the air. Now, they must see what the defenders have in store. Northwest France, August 1940, and the Persian Gulf, January 1991. Air crews prepare for the final vital phase of the control of the air battle plan. Follow through. Single-minded execution of the battle plan while retaining sufficient flexibility to respond to the unexpected. For the Luftwaffe, August 10th is Adlertag, launch day for the main attack on RAF Fighter Command. But bad weather forces Goering to postpone to the 13th. Recognizing that the British radar towers must be of some importance, the Luftwaffe attacks them on the 12th. One is severely damaged, and two temporarily knocked out. The British race to get them back on the air, so German intelligence concludes that the raids have had little effect. Thus, for the main attack, Goering tells his men to focus on the RAF's airfields. It's his first serious blunder, a failure to follow through his battle plan with sufficient single-mindedness. A few more days of attacks might have deprived Fighter Command of its vital eyes. Goering's blunder underlines how essential intelligence is at this stage in the battle plan for control of the air.
It's important when one is undertaking a battle to control the skies to know when the job has been done, or is it very near to being done. The difficulty, though, is gaining information that allows you to make that decision.
On August 13th, Goering and his commanders gather on the French coast to watch the Luftwaffe launch its main assault. And for the next 3 weeks, the two air forces are locked in a desperate battle of attrition. The air defense system, which Dowding had put in place before the war, now proves vital. The German bomber groups can be spotted forming up over France and tracked as they approach. RAF fighters are scrambled with just enough time to mass above the raiders and intercept in the most efficient way possible. And throughout the battle, the RAF continues to enjoy this advantage because of that first fundamental blunder by Goering. But the constant combat and the attacks on the airfields are having an effect on the British. Both sides are losing about the same number of fighters. But during August, RAF Fighter Command loses a quarter of its pilots. The remaining RAF pilots have to fly several missions a day, often without sufficient rest. It's a pace which cannot be sustained. By the beginning of September, the RAF is approaching exhaustion. Then suddenly, on September 7th, the airfield attacks stop. Goering has changed tactics again. More than 1,000 bombers head directly for the city of London. January 16th, 1991. 6:45 in the evening, Washington time. 2:45 the next morning, Iraqi time. The air phase of Operation Desert Storm begins spectacularly as air raid warnings sound and all of Baghdad's anti-aircraft artillery, AAA as pilots call it, opens up. Excited reporters begin telephoning their stories. Suddenly, at 3 a.m. local time, the lines go dead. A pair of 2,000-pound laser-guided bombs from a U.S. F-117 Nighthawk have found their mark, the Iraqi government telecommunications building. Simultaneously, bombs from 7 other Nighthawks devastate other communication centers, air defense headquarters, and command bunkers in the city. 6 minutes later, the first of 54 Tomahawk cruise missiles crash into the Ministry of Defense building, the headquarters of Saddam Hussein's ruling Ba'ath Party, his presidential palaces, and electric power stations. This is how the air campaign of Desert Storm will be remembered. But in reality, on that first night, the important action is taking place far to the south, well away from the television cameras. At 22 minutes to 3, 15 U.S. helicopters destroy 2 Iraqi early warning radar sites on the southern border. Through the hole created, aircraft race northwards to jam Baghdad's early warning radars and attack air defense operation centers controlling the city. These are followed by target drones, which cause individual Iraqi missile batteries to activate their own radars. They are then hit by a hail of anti-radar homing missiles. Over the next 3 days, a further 70 border radar posts, which had not turned their radars on, are eliminated. The effect is to create a vast area above 10,000 feet within which coalition aircraft can operate virtually unhindered. Any Iraqi fighters which attempt to intervene are swiftly dealt with by interceptors homed in on them by AWACS aircraft. More than 40% of kills are made at beyond visual range, with the pilots guided simply by AWACS radar. Once the Iraqi Air Force is pinned on the ground, over 400 of its 600 hardened shelters are destroyed using special bunker-busting laser-guided bombs. By day 11, the remnants of the Iraqi Air Force flees to Iran, where it is interned. The coalition has achieved total air supremacy. The opening phase of General Horner's air control battle plan has gone better than anyone dared hope. September 15th, 1940, the Luftwaffe mounts another huge raid on London. For Goering, the change of tactics will prove to be a catastrophic blunder.
The critical moment during the Battle of Britain was the German decision to discontinue their bombing of the RAF air stations. And it's interesting to note that the Germans were in fact very close to succeeding in their aim of stopping the Royal Air Force flying.
If the raids on the airfields had continued, the RAF might well have been overwhelmed. Instead, it's able to rebuild and recuperate. Now, it's the Luftwaffe which begins to suffer. Luftwaffe pilots are disconcerted by the way the RAF always seems to be waiting for them, and in much larger numbers than expected. In the excitement of combat, both sides greatly overestimate their opponent's losses. Luftwaffe morale slumps as its bombers keep being intercepted even when the enemy should have been swept from the sky. Between September 7th and 15th, the Luftwaffe loses 199 bombers and 99 fighters, a rate of loss that cannot be sustained. Daylight raids are finally abandoned on October 5th. A week later, Hitler cancels Operation Sea Lion, the projected invasion, thus recognizing that the Luftwaffe has failed to establish the necessary control of the air. The blitz on British cities continues until the spring of 1941. But effectively, the Battle of Britain has been won by the RAF once the Luftwaffe switches away from its attack on the airfields. Once again, the failure of the German battle planners to follow through single-mindedly lets the RAF off the hook. Iraq, January 1991. At the end of the first week, the campaign turns to cutting off the Iraqi army in Kuwait. 41 of the 54 road and rail bridges between Baghdad and Kuwait are destroyed. The capacity of the supply routes heading south is reduced by 90%. At low level, there is still danger for coalition aircraft from AAA and missile batteries, which only switch on their radars at the last moment. The British Air Force suffers particularly when it attacks Iraqi air bases at low level with a weapon which scatters runway cratering bombs. 4 tornadoes are lost as they hit walls of AAA. Nevertheless, the air control battle plan moves on. The elimination of Iraqi ground forces begins. Veteran B-52 bombers carpet bomb the Iraqi defensive positions, killing some 9,000 troops. The raids have a devastating effect on morale. Between 100 and 150,000 Iraqi troops desert during the 3-week period. A good example of the need for flexibility within a minutely choreographed battle plan comes on the second day, when the Iraqis launched 7 Scud missiles at Israel. Horner immediately diverts his F-15 Strike Eagles to destroy the fixed Scud launcher sites. For the remainder of the campaign, the F-15s are kept on standby to go after the mobile launchers now being pinpointed by coalition special forces. This swift action, coupled with the deployment of Patriot anti-missile missiles to guard Israel's cities, prevents the Israelis from striking back and threatening the cohesion of the fragile UN coalition. By the time the coalition forces launch the second stage of Operation Desert Storm, the ground campaign, more than 50% of the Iraqi army has been destroyed. The rest collapses within a week. Less than 200 coalition troops are killed, and no tanks lost to achieve this extraordinary victory. Never before has the importance of control of the air over a battlefield been so clearly demonstrated. Over southern England in 1940 and Iraq in 1991, there were clear winners and losers. So how did the opponents in each case measure up to the basic requirements of the control of the air battle plan? Objective. In each case, the defender had a clear objective: survival. Dowding and RAF Fighter Command in 1940 succeeded in staying in action until the Luftwaffe could go on no longer. In 1991, the Iraqi air defense system proved inadequate for the task of retaining control of the air. In 1940, Goering was slow to focus on his ultimate objective, whereas Horner in 1991 knew precisely what must be done to achieve control of the air. Means. In 1940, the two sides in the Battle of Britain were more evenly matched than often realized. Both had the means to carry out their objectives. The winner would be decided by other factors. Similarly, in 1991, the Iraqis seemed to have the sort of advanced weaponry needed to deny the coalition control of the air. It was the other factors which General Horner could call on, which tipped the balance so dramatically. Intelligence. In 1940, the Luftwaffe was totally let down by its intelligence service, both in anticipating the strength of its enemy and assessing the success of its campaign. The RAF may have overestimated its success in shooting down German aircraft, but in the end, this did not matter. In 1991, the Iraqi Air Force was also totally let down by its intelligence. Nothing was done to prepare it for the high-tech storm which would overwhelm it. On the coalition side, the weaknesses of the Iraqi air defense system were correctly judged so that air control could swiftly be established. Force ratio. In the Battle of Britain, it was radar and the integrated air defense system which gave Dowding a crucial advantage over Goering. The fact that the Luftwaffe was fighting over England and further from its bases also had a significant effect which the Germans failed to allow for. In 1991, even though the coalition was fighting far from home, its technological supremacy acted as a huge force multiplier. A more consistent use of Scuds against Israel by the Iraqis might have had an effect out of all proportion to its military significance, but the Iraqis failed to follow this through. Follow-through. In Desert Storm in 1991, General Horner was single-minded in his execution of his battle plan, but still flexible enough to make significant changes. The scale of the Allied air assault never gave the Iraqis time to react consistently. In contrast, in 1940, Goering twice had the RAF close to defeat, but on both occasions switched targets before finishing the job. Dowding was utterly focused on using his forces as effectively as possible to grind the Luftwaffe into abandoning its assault. So what of the future for control of the air? Television pictures of the amazing precision of the new Allied weapons were the most powerful images of the Desert Storm air battle. But in 1991, less than 10% of the munitions dropped were precision-guided. By Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003, almost all were, and they were even more accurate because the missiles could now fly directly to GPS coordinates without further guidance.
And that differs now with modern technology, which allows precision-guided munitions to be fired at very great distances, therefore not requiring an aircraft platform to be in the relatively close proximity of the target.
Precision guidance spread to all types of aircraft when the U.S. developed the JDAM, or Joint Direct Attack Munition, a kit which could be attached to ordinary bombs and guide them to a GPS coordinate. Used with the JSTAR system and Predator unmanned surveillance vehicles, enemy ground forces can now be destroyed accurately by aircraft operating in safety from many miles away. The power of the new systems was first shown in Afghanistan, when a handful of U.S. and British special forces called in precision airstrikes, which destroyed the will of the Taliban forces to resist. Then, during Operation Iraqi Freedom, the few Iraqi armored units which attempted to attack U.S. forces in the open during their Blitzkrieg advance were destroyed by airstrikes long before they got anywhere near their opponent. Control of the air has at last become the deciding factor on the battlefield. A nation's armed forces can be destroyed by modern precision weaponry. But in the end, forces on the ground are still essential. Paradoxically, control of the air can create the conditions in which victory is certain, but it will never be able to secure the final victory.